What if the greatest risk in your life is not stepping into the unknown, but remaining where your spirit can no longer breathe? You may know this feeling. From the outside, your life may appear stable. You continue doing what is expected of you. You fulfill your responsibilities. You smile when you are supposed to smile, answer when someone calls, and move through each day with a quiet determination to keep everything together. Yet somewhere beneath all of that movement, there may be a voice asking, is this really the life I am meant to live? Perhaps you have ignored that voice because listening to it would require change, and change feels uncertain. It may ask you to have a conversation you have been avoiding, release a relationship that has become painful, forgive someone who never apologized, or stop pretending that you are happy with a life that no longer reflects who you are. Fear often tells you that it is protecting you. It says, do not take the risk. Stay where things are familiar. Do not speak your truth. Do not let go. Do not trust what you cannot see. And because fear speaks with urgency, you may believe it is wisdom. But fear and wisdom do not feel the same inside you. Fear tightens. Wisdom opens. Fear rushes. Wisdom waits. Fear imagines everything that could go wrong. Wisdom quietly reminds you that even when life changes, something deeper within you remains untouched. You may have spent years believing that safety comes from controlling the future. You plan, prepare, imagine conversations, and try to predict how others will respond. You may replay every possible outcome because you believe that if you think long enough, you can protect yourself from pain. Yet the mind can never create enough certainty to satisfy fear. There will always be another question, another possibility, another reason to wait. And while you wait, life continues moving. The river does not stop flowing until it understands where every turn will lead. The tree does not refuse to release its leaves because it fears winter. Nature does not demand guarantees. It moves in harmony with an intelligence larger than appearances. Perhaps there is something within you that is also asking to move. Not recklessly, not dramatically, not to prove anything to anyone, but gently, honestly, and in alignment with the truth you have been carrying in silence. No risk, no story does not mean that you must chase danger or create a life filled with constant change. The deeper risk is spiritual. It is the willingness to release the identity that fear has built around you. It is the courage to stop asking the world for permission to be yourself. Sometimes the risk is saying no without giving a long explanation. Sometimes it is admitting that you are tired. Sometimes it is allowing yourself to rest without feeling guilty. Sometimes it is choosing peace over the need to win an argument. And sometimes it is opening your heart again after disappointment taught you to close it. These moments may look small, but they can change the direction of your inner life. Your true story does not begin when everything outside you finally becomes perfect. It begins when you stop allowing fear to make every decision. It begins when you recognize that the voice demanding complete certainty is not your deepest self. Your deepest self is quieter. It does not compete for attention. It does not insult you or frighten you into action. It speaks through a sense of knowing, a feeling of openness, a gentle pull toward honesty, compassion, and peace. You may have felt this presence in moments of silence, perhaps while watching the sky at the end of a long day, sitting beside someone you love, walking alone beneath the trees, or waking in the middle of the night when the world was still. In those moments, you may have remembered that you are more than your worries, more than your history, more than the roles you play and the expectations you carry. You may have felt, even briefly, that life was not something you had to conquer, it was something you could trust. The challenge is that the ego does not trust easily. It wants proof before surrender. It wants certainty before movement. It wants to know how the story ends before allowing you to begin. But a life guided only by certainty becomes very small. You remain in familiar rooms, repeating familiar thoughts, surrounded by the same emotional patterns. You may call it security, but your heart may experience it as confinement. The unknown is not always an enemy. Sometimes it is the space where your old identity can finally loosen. It is the open field where a new understanding can grow. It is the silence between chapters when nothing seems clear, yet something sacred is quietly reorganizing within you. You may not need to see the whole road. You may only need to notice the next honest step. That step could be forgiving yourself for the time you believe you lost. It could be releasing resentment that has occupied your heart for years. It could be trusting that what is leaving your life may be creating space for something more peaceful. It could be choosing to speak to yourself with the same tenderness you offer to others. And perhaps the story you are waiting for is not a story about becoming someone extraordinary. Perhaps it is the story of remembering who you were before fear taught you to hide. You do not have to force this remembrance. You do not have to rush toward a new version of yourself. The truth within you has never disappeared. It has simply been covered by noise, obligation, comparison, and the belief that you must know exactly what comes next. As we move deeper into this reflection, you may begin to see that the question is not whether life will contain uncertainty. It will. The question is whether you will meet that uncertainty through fear or through trust. And when you begin to understand who is truly afraid within you, the story of your life may start to change in ways you never expected. Fear rarely introduces itself as fear. It often arrives disguised as caution, responsibility, logic, or maturity. It tells you that you are simply being realistic. It reminds you of what happened before. It gathers old disappointments and presents them as evidence that you should not trust again. This is how the ego protects its position. It does not want you to see beyond the identity it has created. It prefers the familiar version of you, even when that version is unhappy, because the familiar feels easier to control. The ego is not something you need to hate. It is simply the part of the mind that believes you are separate from life, separate from love, and alone in an unpredictable world. Because it feels separate, it is always searching for protection. It compares, judges, resists, and tries to control whatever it can. You may notice this in ordinary moments. Someone does not reply to your message, and your mind quickly creates a story. Perhaps they are angry. Perhaps you said something wrong. Perhaps they no longer care. Before anything has actually happened, you are already suffering inside a future imagined by fear. Or you see someone moving forward in a way you wish you could. They appear confident, peaceful, successful in love, or certain about their path. Suddenly, your own life feels smaller. Comparison enters, and the ego whispers that you are behind. But behind whom? There is no single timetable for becoming more conscious. A flower does not look at another flower and decide it has failed because it opened later. It responds to its own season, its own light, and its own hidden rhythm. You also have a rhythm that cannot be measured by another person's life. The ego, however, does not understand this. It sees life as a contest. It believes that someone else's joy reduces your chances of finding your own. It turns another person's beauty into a reason to criticize yourself. It turns another person's progress into proof that you are late. Awareness changes this. The moment you notice comparison without becoming lost in it, you create space. You begin to see the thought rather than becoming the thought. You can gently say, this is the mind comparing again. This is not the truth of who I am. You do not have to fight the thought. Fighting gives it more energy. You can simply observe it, as you might watch a cloud crossing the sky. The cloud appears, changes shape, and eventually passes. The sky does not become damaged by the cloud. Your awareness is like that sky. Thoughts of fear, jealousy, doubt, and insecurity may move through you, but they are not the whole of you. Beneath them is a presence that remains open, still, and untouched. This presence does not need to prove itself. It does not need to be first. It does not need every person to approve of its choices. Yet many people spend years organizing their lives around approval. They become skilled at reading the moods of others. They know when to remain silent, when to agree, and how to become what each person expects. Perhaps you have done this so often that you are no longer certain what you truly want. You may say yes when your body is asking for rest. You may accept behavior that hurts you because you are afraid of conflict. You may stay quiet because you do not want anyone to feel disappointed. People-pleasing can appear loving, but beneath it there is often fear. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear that your value depends on how comfortable you make everyone else feel. There is nothing wrong with wanting harmony, but harmony that requires you to abandon yourself is not peace. It is self-erasure. True peace does not ask you to become harsh. It asks you to become honest. You can say no with kindness. You can create distance without hatred. You can protect your inner life without punishing anyone. A boundary can be an expression of love when it comes from clarity rather than resentment. The ego may tell you that setting a boundary is dangerous. It may say, they will leave. They will misunderstand you. They will think you are selfish. And perhaps someone will misunderstand. You cannot control another person's interpretation of your truth. You can only choose whether you will continue betraying yourself in order to manage their perception. This is one of the risks your true story requires, the risk of being seen as you are, the risk of no longer performing for acceptance, the risk of allowing some relationships to change when you stop participating in old patterns. At first, this can feel lonely. When you stop playing the role others expect, there may be silence. Some people may resist the new clarity in you because they were comfortable with your old fear. But the silence that follows self-honesty is often more peaceful than the noise of constant self-betrayal. Control is another way the ego tries to avoid uncertainty. It wants to arrange people, outcomes, timing, and emotions. It believes that peace will arrive once everything behaves according to the plan. But life has never promised to follow the mind's plan. Relationships change. Bodies age. Opportunities appear and disappear. People make choices you do not understand. Seasons end before you feel ready. When you believe peace depends on controlling these movements, peace remains fragile. It is like trying to hold the ocean still with your hands. The more tightly you resist the waves, the more exhausted you become. The ocean is not punishing you. It is simply moving according to its nature. Life also moves. Surrender does not mean that you stop caring. It means that you stop demanding that reality be different before you allow yourself to breathe. You can take action while releasing control of the outcome. You can speak your truth while releasing control of how it is received. You can love someone while releasing the need to own their choices. You can prepare for the future while releasing the belief that preparation can remove all uncertainty. This is where spiritual freedom begins. Imagine that you are holding a seed. You place it into the earth, water it, and give it light. You cannot pull it open to make it grow faster. You cannot demand that it become a tree tomorrow. Your role is participation, not control. In the same way, you can plant intentions in your life. You can choose love, honesty, forgiveness, and awareness. But there comes a moment when you must trust the unseen process. The ego finds this difficult because it wants visible proof. It wants immediate confirmation that the risk was worth taking. It asks, what if I let go and nothing better comes? What if I forgive and they never change? What if I speak honestly and lose the relationship? These questions are understandable. They arise from the wish to avoid pain. But forgiveness is not an agreement that another person will change. It is a decision that their behavior will no longer control the quality of your inner life. Letting go is not a bargain with the universe. It is not saying, I will release this pain only if you replace it with something better. Letting go is the recognition that carrying the pain has become more costly than entering the unknown without it. You may have carried resentment for a long time. Perhaps someone betrayed you, dismissed you, or left when you needed them. The ego may keep replaying the memory because it believes repetition will protect you. It says, do not forget what happened. If you release this anger, you may become vulnerable again. But remembering and suffering are not the same thing. You can remember a lesson without reopening the wound each day. You can honor what happened without allowing it to define every future relationship. You can become wiser without becoming closed. Resentment often feels like strength because it creates distance from pain. Yet over time, the distance becomes a wall. It does not only keep pain out, it also keeps love from entering freely. Awareness allows you to see this without judgment. You may notice how the past is still shaping your reactions. A new person says something innocent, but an old wound hears danger. A small disagreement occurs, and suddenly you are defending yourself against every disagreement you have ever experienced. This does not mean there is something wrong with you. It means a frightened part of you is asking to be seen. Instead of criticizing that part, you can meet it with compassion. You might quietly ask, what am I afraid will happen here? What old story is trying to protect me? Is this moment truly dangerous, or is the past speaking through the present? These questions create light. Awareness is not a weapon used to defeat the ego. It is a lamp carried into the rooms where fear has been hiding. Once you see clearly, you no longer need to obey every fearful instruction. You begin to recognize that many risks are not physical risks at all. They are risks to the identity you have maintained. If you stop comparing, who will you be without the need to feel ahead or behind? If you stop pleasing everyone, who will you be without constant approval? If you release resentment, who will you be without the story of what was done to you? If you surrender control, who will you be when life is allowed to surprise you? These questions can feel unsettling because the ego builds identity from familiar patterns. even painful ones. It would often rather remain a known prisoner than enter an unknown freedom. But your true self does not fear freedom. Your true self is not trying to become superior, admired, or invulnerable. It is simply trying to live without the heavy costume of fear. The costume may have protected you once. It may have helped you survive rejection, loss, criticism, or uncertainty. You can be grateful for the ways your mind tried to protect you. And then, gently, you can recognize that you no longer need to wear every defense forever. A shell protects a seed for a time, but when growth begins, the shell must break. From the outside, breaking may look like destruction. From within, it is the beginning of life. Perhaps something in you is also beginning to break open. A belief you can no longer carry, a role that no longer fits, a fear that no longer feels like truth. You do not have to force the opening. Awareness itself begins the process. Each time you notice fear and choose not to let it decide for you, the old shell becomes thinner. Each time you choose honesty over approval, peace over control, or compassion over judgment, you move closer to the self beneath the ego. And you may begin to realize that the unknown is not asking you to lose yourself. It is asking you to stop losing yourself to fear. When you stop losing yourself to fear, something quiet begins to return. It may not arrive as a dramatic realization. It may come as a softer breath, a little less tension in your shoulders, a moment when you notice that you no longer need to defend yourself against life. This is often how the true self returns, not with noise, but with spaciousness. You may begin to understand that the person you are searching for is not somewhere in the future. You do not have to become more impressive, more spiritual, or more complete. Beneath the fear, the comparison, and the need for approval, there is already a presence within you that knows how to be at peace. Returning to that presence requires forgiveness. Forgiveness is sometimes misunderstood as a gift you give to the person who hurt you. But spiritually, forgiveness is the release of your own heart from the past. It is the decision to stop allowing an old moment to keep creating new suffering. You may feel that forgiveness is too risky. Perhaps you fear that letting go means pretending the pain did not matter. You may believe that anger is the only proof that you have not forgotten what happened. But you can remember without remaining imprisoned. You can say, what happened was painful. It changed me. It taught me something. And then you can also say, I will not continue carrying this moment into every room I enter. Forgiveness does not erase discernment. It does not require you to return to a harmful situation. It does not remove healthy boundaries. It simply releases the emotional rope that keeps you tied to what can no longer be changed. Imagine holding a burning piece of coal because you hope someone else will feel the heat. The longer you hold it, the more deeply it burns your own hand. Forgiveness is not saying the coal was harmless. It is simply choosing to put it down. Sometimes the person you most need to forgive is yourself. Perhaps you regret how long you stayed, how often you ignored your intuition, how many years you spent trying to become someone others would approve of. You may look back and think you should have known better. But the person you were then only knew what they knew then. You were moving through life with the awareness, fear, and understanding available to you at that moment. You made choices from the consciousness you carried. Now that your awareness has expanded, you can see those choices differently. That does not mean you were foolish. It means you have grown. A tree does not resent its earlier rings. Each one records a season of rain, drought, sunlight, and survival. Without those seasons, the tree would not have the strength it has now. Your past is also part of your growth. You do not need to romanticize it. You do not need to call every painful experience a blessing. You can simply recognize that even pain can become wisdom when it is held in awareness rather than resentment. This understanding makes surrender possible. Surrender is one of the greatest risks the ego can imagine. The ego hears surrender and thinks it means defeat. It thinks you are giving up your power. But spiritual surrender is not the abandonment of power. It is the abandonment of struggle against what already is. Perhaps a relationship ended, but part of you is still arguing with the ending. Perhaps your body has changed with age, but your mind continues fighting the passage of time. Perhaps someone made a choice you cannot accept, and each day you mentally rewrite the scene. The event happened once, but resistance causes it to happen again inside you. Surrender gently says, this is what has occurred. I may not understand it. I may not like it, but I am willing to stop demanding that the past become different. In that willingness, energy returns to you. The energy you used to spend rehearsing arguments, imagining different outcomes, and asking why life did not follow your plan becomes available for healing. You begin to live where life is actually happening, here, now. Not in the conversation that should have gone differently, not in the future where everything might finally make sense, but in this breath, this room, this moment. The present may not contain all the answers, but it contains your life. When you return to the present, you may notice how often fear has been creating futures that do not exist. You may have felt the pain of rejection before anyone rejected you. You may have grieved losses that never occurred. You may have exhausted yourself preparing for disasters that lived only in thought. This is not a reason to criticize the mind. The mind is trying to keep you safe. But you can thank it without believing every story it creates. You can say, I see that you are afraid, but in this moment I am breathing. In this moment I am here. In this moment I can choose peace. This choice is not denial, it is alignment. Alignment means bringing your thoughts, intentions, words, and actions closer to love. It is not perfection. It is the gentle practice of noticing when fear has taken the wheel and allowing something wiser to guide you again. You may ask, how do I know whether I am acting from fear or love? Fear usually carries urgency. It says you must act immediately or lose everything. It tightens the body. It demands control. It imagines enemies. Love is quieter. It may still ask you to make a difficult decision, but it does not ask you to hate. It may guide you away from a relationship, but it does not require revenge. It may ask you to speak honestly, but it does not need to humiliate anyone. Love and weakness are not the same. Sometimes love says yes, sometimes love says no, sometimes love stays, sometimes love leaves. The question is not whether the choice looks gentle from the outside. The question is whether it arises from clarity or fear. Your intention matters. Two people can perform the same action with very different inner energy. One person may remain silent because they are terrified of conflict. Another may remain silent because they recognize that more words would only deepen harm. One person may leave because they want to punish. Another may leave because staying requires them to abandon themselves. The action alone does not reveal the truth. The intention beneath it does. When your intention is peace, you begin to move differently. You stop asking, how can I win? And begin asking, how can I remain connected to who I truly am? This shift changes relationships. You no longer need every disagreement to become a battle for identity. You can listen without immediately preparing a defense. You can acknowledge another person's feelings without surrendering your own truth. You can begin to see that everyone is acting from their present level of awareness. Some people act from love, others act from fear, pain, or unconscious patterns. Their behavior may affect you, but it does not have to define the energy you carry. This does not mean you tolerate everything. It means you stop allowing another person's unconsciousness to determine your consciousness. You choose your response. And in choosing your response, you reclaim your inner freedom. There may be someone in your life who constantly brings out an old version of you. Around them, you feel small, defensive, or desperate to be understood. Perhaps you have tried many times to change the relationship. A new perspective may be to stop asking how to control them and begin asking what the relationship is revealing within you. Is it showing you where you still seek approval? Is it showing you where a boundary is needed? Is it revealing an old wound that wants compassion? Every difficult relationship can become a mirror. The mirror does not excuse harmful behavior. It simply allows you to notice what is being activated within you. This awareness transforms pain into instruction. Life begins to feel less like something happening against you and more like something awakening you. Even loss can open this doorway. When someone or something you love is taken from your life, the mind may feel that the story has ended. Grief can make the world appear empty. You may wonder how life can continue when the shape of your life has changed so completely. There is no spiritual idea that should rush grief. Love needs room to mourn. Tears are not a failure of faith. They are often love moving through the body when it no longer knows where to go. But within grief, another understanding may slowly emerge. What you loved was never contained only in a physical form, a role, or a particular season. Love is larger than form. The form may change, but the love you experience becomes part of your consciousness. It lives in the patience you learned, the tenderness you now offer, the memories that soften you, the way your heart became capable of caring more deeply. Loss changes the story, but it does not erase the love. Trusting this takes courage. Trust is not the belief that nothing painful will happen. Trust is the willingness to remain open even though life cannot promise permanent forms. A flower blooms fully even though it will eventually release its petals. It does not withhold its beauty because the season is temporary. Perhaps you are also being invited to live this way. To love without demanding permanence. To appreciate without possessing. To participate in life without trying to freeze it. The ego says, do not love too deeply, you might lose. The true self whispers, love is never lost. It becomes part of what you are. When you begin trusting life, uncertainty changes meaning. It is no longer only a place of danger, it becomes a place of possibility, mystery, and spiritual movement. You stop needing to know how every chapter will unfold. You begin to understand that clarity often arrives after the step, not before it. A path through a forest rarely reveals the entire journey. It shows only the next few feet, yet those few feet are enough to continue. Life may be offering you the same kind of guidance, a quiet conversation you know you need to have, a habit of self-criticism you are ready to release, an apology you want to offer, a boundary you can no longer ignore, a dream you have dismissed because it did not come with a guarantee. You do not need complete certainty. You need enough stillness to recognize the next honest step. The source of life does not usually shout over the noise of fear. Its guidance may appear as a sense of expansion, a repeated inner knowing, or a peace that remains even when the decision is difficult. You can learn to listen for this, not by forcing an answer, but by becoming quiet enough to receive one. In silence, you may discover that your true self has never been confused. The confusion belonged to the competing voices of fear, expectation, memory, and social approval. Beneath them, something in you has always known what brings you closer to love. This knowing does not guarantee comfort. Sometimes a loving choice asks you to walk through uncertainty, but it carries a different quality. It feels clean. It does not require you to betray your soul. And with every step taken from that place, you return to yourself. You begin to see that your story was never about proving that you were fearless. It was about learning that fear did not have to become your guide. The risk was not entering the unknown. The risk was trusting the loving presence within you more than the frightened voice that had controlled you for so long. And when that trust begins to grow, even the unknown can start to feel like home. And when the unknown begins to feel like home, you no longer need life to explain itself before you are willing to live it. You begin to understand that peace was never waiting at the end of certainty. It was available in the moment you stopped demanding certainty from life. This does not mean fear disappears forever. Fear may still visit. It may appear before a difficult conversation, during a season of change, or in the quiet hours when the future feels unclear. But now you can recognize it. You can notice the tightening in your body. You can hear the familiar voice predicting loss, rejection, or failure. And instead of allowing that voice to make the decision, you can pause. That pause is sacred. It is the small space between an old pattern and a new response. It is where awareness enters. It is where you remember that you are not the frightened thought moving through your mind. You are the presence noticing it. In that space, you may ask yourself, what would love choose here? Not what would impress others, not what would protect the ego, not what would guarantee the outcome, but what would allow you to remain connected to truth, kindness, and inner peace. Some days, love may guide you to act. Other days, it may guide you to wait. It may ask you to speak, forgive, rest, release, or simply become still. There is no single formula for living from the true self. There is only the willingness to listen. You may begin each morning with a few quiet moments before the demands of the world enter your mind. You do not need a perfect ritual. You can sit beside a window, place your hand over your heart, and notice your breathing. You might ask, what am I carrying from yesterday that I do not need to carry today? Perhaps it is an argument, a regret, a fear, or the need to control something beyond your reach. You do not have to solve it. You can simply become willing to loosen your grip. Even a small willingness creates movement. You may also practice gratitude, not as a way of denying what hurts, but as a way of remembering that pain is not the whole story. You can notice the light entering the room, the warmth of a cup in your hands, the presence of someone who cares, or the simple fact that you have been given another day to become more awake. Gratitude does not ask life to be perfect. It teaches the heart to recognize what fear overlooks. Awareness can continue throughout the day. When you feel yourself comparing, pause and return to your own path. When you notice people-pleasing, ask whether your yes is coming from love or fear. When resentment rises, remember that forgiveness is not approval. It is the decision to stop offering your peace to the past. When uncertainty appears, gently bring yourself back to what is real now. This breath, this step, this moment. You may not know what next month will bring. You may not know whether every relationship will remain, whether every plan will succeed, or whether others will understand your choices. But you can know the intention you bring into this moment. You can choose to be honest without becoming cruel. You can choose a boundary without hatred. You can release an old chapter without pretending it meant nothing. You can walk forward without needing the entire path to appear. This is how your story changes. Not through one dramatic leap, but through many quiet moments when fear speaks and you choose not to abandon yourself. Each time you return to awareness, the ego loses a little of its authority. Each time you choose compassion, love becomes more natural. Each time you let go, you discover that your hands were never empty. They were simply becoming available to receive life in a new way. You may also find that aging, loss, and change no longer feel like proof that life is taking something from you. They begin to feel like invitations to release what cannot last and deepen your relationship with what is eternal. Your body changes, roles change, plans change. The world around you continues moving. But the loving presence within you does not grow old. It was there when you were a child looking at the sky with wonder. It was there during every season you thought you would not survive. It was there in your joy, your confusion, your grief, and your healing. It has never left. Perhaps the purpose of your life is not to build a perfect story. Perhaps it is to awaken inside the story you have been given. To become conscious of the moments when fear closes your heart. To forgive yourself when you forget. To return to love when you are ready. To trust that every sincere return brings you closer to who you have always been. No risk, no story is not an invitation to live carelessly. It is an invitation to stop allowing fear to write every chapter. The risk may be trusting yourself. It may be releasing control. It may be opening your heart after loss. It may be choosing peace even when the ego wants to fight. It may be stepping into a future you cannot yet explain. But every time you take one honest step from love, you do not move away from safety. You move toward the deepest safety you can know. The awareness that your peace does not depend on controlling life. You belong to life. You are part of the same intelligence that opens flowers, moves rivers, and carries the seasons from one form into another. You do not have to understand every movement to trust that you are held within it. So breathe gently. Let the future remain unopened for a little while. Let the past rest where it belongs, and allow this moment to be enough. Your story does not begin when fear disappears. It begins when fear is no longer the author. If this reflection has awakened something within you, share in the comments the fear you are ready to stop carrying, and subscribe for more quiet spiritual journeys that help you return to the wisdom, peace, and loving presence already living within you. The path ahead may still be unknown, but you are no longer walking it as a stranger to yourself.